Well, hey, everybody. Powerful song, isn't it? Well, welcome. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus, and He continues to help me work through and face my grief, and my name is Tanya. Hi, and welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming out and being here tonight, and especially those of you from First Baptist Newport Richie, if I said that right, yes? Yeah, okay, good. We have another church visiting us here tonight. They're starting a CR there, so they're checking out other CRs to learn. So be nice to them, people. Be nice. We don't bite, at least not tonight. All right. Well, I'm happy to confess that I'm excited about tonight's lesson because it's a super simple and easy step to implement in our journeys here. Yay, right? We like those easy steps that are easy to work in here because we do a lot of work and it's hard work. And so not only is this step an easy step to do, but when we do it, another thing happens is we receive a lot of positive benefits from it. And that's what I love about it. And tonight we're going to talk about those positive benefits we get when we work on acknowledging our victories in our recovery. Big or small, our victories, doesn't matter the size. Yes. And for the people, the new people, I'm a cat person. You're going to figure it out. But anyway, any victories, big or small, they're all worth, and any progress we make are worth noticing and paying attention to because it's what helps gives us the motivation to keep going and working on our recoveries. And I was doing some research like, why is it important to acknowledge success or victories or things like that? And I couldn't get over how many positive psychological benefits there are when we work in experiencing and acknowledging victories we have in our life. And so I will tell you that I just added maybe a tiny bit more information into your handouts. As a matter of fact, everybody get a handout. If you didn't raise your hand, Digger will bring one to you. And actually, I put a lot of extra information in your bulletins. I'm being a bit facetious, but I want you to be able to take this home and have it on hand, a lot of the positive benefits, because it's easy to forget the power of the positive benefits that we can receive when we are acknowledging our victories and our recoveries here. So before we begin, let's jump in and go over our principle and step for tonight, and then we'll get into all this good stuff and the benefits from working our victory and our recoveries. So principle 5 is voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects. It corresponds with the beatitude of Matthew 5:6. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. Step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And it goes along with the scripture, James 4:10. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. And tonight's lesson is extra special because you don't get one step to go along with it. You get 2 steps to go along with this. So step 7, we humbly ask Him to remove all of our shortcomings. And it goes along with 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. So when we work principle 5 and step 6 and 7, we are acknowledging, 1, that we're ready to give up our character defects, and 2, we want God to remove them. But we've done a lot of work that we had to go through before we could get to this place and get to this part of our working on our victories. Because a lot of you, if you're in a 12-step, you just did your 5th step, which is reading your inventories that you wrote you're acknowledging it to yourself, to God, and someone you trust. And that's a huge step. And that's where we get in touch with our character defects. That's where we begin to identify some of the things we need to work on or replace or change. And so that's a very important step. And then we move into 6 and 7, which says, okay, I now recognize what those character defects are. God, help me get ready. God, I'm ready. Let's remove them. And then comes the next step, which can be particularly challenging before you get to the victory, is a lot of times when we're ready to make those changes, all of a sudden you're going to be triggered with a lot of fears and insecurities. They're going to be telling you all the reasons why you should be making these changes, and you're going to have to push through that, not listen to it, and do what you believe God is requiring of you. And once you do that, that is when the victory comes. If you don't let all the other things, other parts of this process stop you, you will then get to victory. And this is powerful in our recoveries when we get to experience this. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some practice to train ourselves, but we can do this. And it's not that hard, but the valuable part when we do practice acknowledging our victories is it teaches our brain a valuable lesson about paying attention to noticing the positive outcomes in our lives. And these can replace our negative thoughts that once resided there. So that's one of the positive benefits of working on acknowledging and remembering what our victories are. It will take practice to train ourselves to replace the negative thoughts patterns with our positive outcomes, but it's going to be tremendous in helping us keep momentum going, keep our recovery going and moving forward if we put this into practice. Now, another benefit of acknowledging our victories is it's going to build up our self-esteem. Because as our self-esteem grows, we build hope, we build motivation, which helps to remind us to keep this going. Otherwise, what happens if we forget that we've been making progress or we've been having victories in here? We're going to lose sight of our progress, we might digress or get stuck. So it's super helpful to let us know and remind us that we are doing something in here. We're just not coming here to meet and say hi to people. We have something that we're going on, that we're doing with God's help in our life, with the support of each other here, supporting one another. And so it's super valuable to remember your victories. Now, the challenge is, how do we remember our victories? Because we probably have had many of them, and I probably don't even remember half of mine. And so there's things we can do to help ourselves remember them. And one of them is we can put it in a journal, write it down. If you have a daily inventory that you're keeping track of, throw it in there just to have a place where you can keep your victories as you're acknowledging them and having them. Or if you have a journal and you just like to use for other things, put it in there. Just write it down somewhere. Another way we can remember our victories is we associate it with a really important question. And the question is, when you have a victory, first thing you should ask yourself is, how did that make me feel? How did that make me feel? Because I'm sure it didn't make you feel bad. I'm sure you felt pretty good, right? That you had a victory, you had something positive, you made some change. And when we can associate a positive feeling with the positive outcome, that helps secure the victory that we had just went through even more so within us. Then we're ready to tackle the next issue that presents itself. And we can build upon the last positive change, grow more positive emotions. And this is going to continue to send more messages to our brain that it was worthwhile what we're doing in here and to keep it up. Now, I do think there is a deterrent and maybe a reason why sometimes we don't want to think about celebrating or acknowledging our victories. And we hear the word celebrate and we think that needs to be associated with doing something big or expensive. And I want you to know you don't have to go hire a band or go out to a pricey dinner or blast confetti every time you do something right and have a victory in here. There are different ways you can celebrate, and there's ways you can do it right here in CR, and it doesn't cost you anything. You know, one of the things you could do, we just had our chip time up here. That's a great time to come up and acknowledge a victory in front of everybody here, is to come get a chip for it. Another one's in your share groups. When you go to share groups, talk about your victories in there. People need to hear that recovery is possible, change is possible. And I think the most powerful way we can share our victories and help ourselves to remember them is in your testimonies. When you're writing your full testimonies after you're done with your 12-step, putting your victories in there will remind you of them, that what they are. You can list them out, write it out, then you're speaking it out, and it's going to make it more powerful of an impact within you. So I'm just giving you kind of a heads up there, a few benefits, a few perks. We're going to get into more. But before we do that, I just want to give you a quick sneak peek, hopefully to get you excited about this lesson and encouraged. And now we're going to jump into our acronym to talk about how do we notice our victories. And the first way to remember our victory is V, which is the first letter on your handout, for value small changes. I want to just remind you, please don't minimize your progress or recovery by telling yourself your change was so small that it is not significant, because that is a lie. All changes matter, no matter how big or how small. And I know you're probably wondering, what is Dave's high school picture up there on the screen doing with this lesson? Yes, that's his graduation picture. He looks like a ladies' man with his gelled out hairdo, bow tie. You do look adorable, honey. But now I want you to take a look at this small change he made when he went to college a year later. Just a few small changes. He dumped the hair gel, he went to the gym, and voila! We got a miracle right before our eyes tonight. He went from small and nerdy, cutie pie, to a stud muffin with puffy hair. So, he gives me so much material, people, I can't help myself. But let me ask ask you, do you think these small changes helped his confidence? Do you think he wanted to keep up these new habits after noticing this stuff? You betcha. You betcha. Now, I know I'm kind of being silly and driving home my point here, and I'm going to get serious again because I want to go over more of the positive benefits that happen when we notice our small changes. There's benefits like we can make sustainable progress because it's easier to incorporate small changes in our daily routines and habits so we can keep them going. Another benefit is it will feel less overwhelming. Big changes can feel overwhelming, leading to resistance, but few smaller changes can feel less daunting and are easier to accept and apply. Another benefit when we notice our small changes that we're incorporating is we build momentum by creating a snowball effect. Making one small change after another boosts our confidence and helps us to keep engaged in the process in here. And the last one is small changes are actually easier to test and learn from. Because sometimes the changes we need to make need to be adjusted, and this is easier to do if there is no significant risk involved. It's easier to pivot and try something different if we need to. So after college, Dave made another pivot and decided he did like his hair gel, and he went back to it. Yeah. He watched a ton of YouTube videos on how to properly use his hair gel and is now getting the results he's always wanted. I will let you all come up with your own conclusion about this picture, but like I said, you can pivot, you can go back. It's small change, right? Gel, no gel. Another thing we can do to help ourselves notice small changes we're making is to ask ourselves some questions. And all these are in your handout, because like I said, I wanted you to have plenty of information so you don't have to take notes and to take home and review. But one of the changes you can ask yourself is, what small change did I notice today? Write it down. Did you apply any principles or steps today? That's a victory. If you made amends, you applied a principle and step. If you reached out, you applied a principle and step. If you wrote an inventory sheet, you applied a principle and step. Those are all victories. And we need to remind ourselves that those are victories. We need to remind ourselves those are small changes we have incorporated into our life to try to live differently and to work the program into our regular life and living. 2 Peter 1:5-7 says, "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love." And I believe when we notice our small changes will also show us if we're growing spiritually. Do you add any of these behaviors when you had a victory? I believe the more we identify the changes we make, the more we'll begin to notice the impact in our walk with God and in our relationships with others. We begin to see that our God is just not a God of mountaintops, but also of our valleys. The next letter that helps us on our quest for change is I, for identify what needs attention next. Yes, sometimes what needs attention is very obvious, and sometimes it's not. We might not struggle with getting stuck in the blinds like this poor little kitty cat, but we might be stuck in our anger and blowing up, or be stuck in our people-pleasing, or being a control freak, or in our drinking, drugging, eating, shopping, watching porn, and many other things. We're a very creative human race. We think of lots of ways to mess up and mess ourselves up. But sometimes our defects are more subtle because we're not in touch with them, or we didn't know how to identify them. And with time, as we work our recovery in here, God shows us both the big and small areas that need to be addressed. But there are times, if you've been in here long enough, I've heard people say over the years, I don't know what to work on now. I don't know what to work on next. And if that happens to you, it's okay. Admit it. That's great. Talk about it. But I have two, I believe, surefire ways that will get an answer for you. The first one is ask God. Ask God. If you're not sure what to work on, ask God to help show you. And if you still are drawing a blank, nothing's still prompting you, then ask somebody else who knows you really well. I'm sure you will find out something you can work on when you ask somebody else who knows you in your life. Now, I will say another thing we got to watch out for, too, with our character defects, because I've seen this a lot over the years, too, as well here in CR, is sometimes we come in here dealing with an addiction, and we end up trading it in for another addiction. We may not have taken a drink in months or even years, but we have out of control eating or shopping problem that we picked up after we dropped the booze. And we may have been telling ourselves, we might have tried rationalizing that this new addiction is not as bad as the old one. But in reality, it's really an indication that we didn't get to dig deep enough to deal with what drove us to the first addiction to begin with. It just means more work is needed. Don't be discouraged. Don't beat yourself up. It happens if that's you. Just own the discovery and begin to dig deeper and ask God to help you see what is driving you to these addictions. Living in truth is the only way we can practice living out Psalm 25, 4-5. It says, "Show me your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are God, my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long." We need to make sure that we are putting our hope in God as we go on this journey, so we can learn to rely on his truth as we face what needs our attention. If hope is in ourself, in our knowledge, in our willpower, we're going to remain right where we're at, and we're not going to make any progress. You know, this past year, I've been asking God to teach me how to walk through my grief. And looking back now, I can see that I did add quite a few small changes as the year went along. I've read about 5 books on grief. I've been to several grief counselors for input and support. I've been making much more of an effort to get out in nature more frequently. I started going to a grief share program. And I continue to add verses to my hope journal that I started. And I know it when I wrote this, I'm like, wow, that sounds like a lot. But I didn't do it all at once. It all happened at different times throughout the year. And as a matter of fact, I just started the Grief Share program a couple months ago. But it's been slowly things I've been adding and trying. And I consider these small changes victories. These are additions were helpful. But it was in the Grief Share program that I started a couple months ago where I really learned the most about grief. And they have some really great informational videos that they show each week in there for the program. And I've learned a lot from those videos. But there was something I also learned that I was very surprised by when they shared about it. And it was that it could take me 2 to 5 years to grieve the loss of my daughter. And that was really hard for me to hear, because I didn't realize how much I had been pushing myself to do more to make in this process, and to hope that it might go quicker. But instead, I realized after hearing this, I'm going to have to adjust my expectations instead and slow down. I realized everything I was doing was good and helping me, but I was attempting to rush my healing process, and that's just going to take years to go through it. I need to stop pushing myself through this and stop beating myself up over what I considered my lack of progress. And accepting this truth helped me to slow down and put my healing process back into God's hands, which helped me to get back to living in the moment, one day at a time, and to acknowledge the small changes I am making and the victories I have made so far. The next thing we can do when we have a victory is celebrate. Somebody want to come up here and sing for me? Celebrate good times. Come on. All right. All right. I thought I was going to sing by myself. Thank you. Celebrate what God has done. There is a difference between celebrating our successes, though, and rewarding ourselves. A reward suggests that you reached the end of a process. You have met your goal. You have earned your prize. The celebrating our successes is about appreciating the process. And though the distinction is subtle, our motivation is what's going to drive our behaviors. And there's 2 kinds of motivation. The first one is an extrinsic motivation. And that's when we feel motivated to complete a task because we want to earn that external reward, gift, ribbon, trophy, money, whatever it is. The process of completing the task becomes more about the final outcome than the process. And when we rely too much on extrinsic motivation and reward, it can be really difficult to find the energy to complete the task if that reward is removed. Now, intrinsic motivation, which is what we work off of here, is a motivation that comes from within, rather than focusing on only the outcome or reward. This type of motivation has more to do with the process and effort of the task more than the outcome. So when we're intrinsically motivated, people engage in the task hoping for change, even if there is no trophy or reward to be won at the end. And then when we celebrate our victories, it's going to allow us, it will enhance actually the positive emotion around our efforts, further increasing our intrinsic motivation to keep doing the same things. So how do we practice intrinsic motivation today? Well, next time when you stop and pray, when your anger is spiking before blowing up, celebrate. Next time you reach out when you're about to relapse, celebrate. Next time you say no or set boundaries with someone toxic, celebrate. Notice your changes and celebrate them. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." Yep, there he is again, my special man. Life is hard, and sometimes we just got to lighten up and laugh, people. And I'm thankful I have a husband who can't help himself but give me cheerful medicine all the time. He's always wanted to be just like MC Hammer with his very own little Hammer Time victory dance, which brings cheerful medicine to my heart. As a matter of fact, I have it for you guys to see tonight.
Can't touch us!
Call now. Did you see that? Call now, get your own lessons, people. He's starting a little side gig there. You know, he's a goofball. And sometimes, honestly, it's what I need to lighten my mood. So we got to figure out, you got to figure out what brings cheerful medicine to your heart. Or do something about it. Join Dave's victory dance class. Or even better, get a kitten. I'll even go with you to help you pick it out. The point is, we don't have to live with a crushed spirit. We can do something about it. We just got to figure out what that is. Another way we can remember our victories is when we tell others about them. Telling others about our victory is a sure way to help us remember what we did. It will also help to keep us motivated as we share our excitement over our changes. When we share victories, you never know when the person you are telling really needed to hear it. And when you celebrate your victories, be sure to include telling those who were your greatest supporters. Go out to lunch with them or dinner and tell them how much they mean to you. The more specific you can be about what value they gave you, the better. People feel genuinely appreciated and more motivated when we let them know how they helped us. Another way to tell others is here in our share groups. Like I mentioned earlier, we can talk about our victories in there, get a chip up here up front in our testimonies, and when you're ready and comfortable, outside of the doors here, we are to share our victories with other people outside of the program. God does not want to waste our pain. He does not want to waste our hurts. He wants it to be used for good, and his power is seen in our weaknesses. And we're reminded of this in 2 Corinthians 12:9 and 10. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. Who else do we know that can turn our messes into a message, our tests into testimonies, our trials into triumphs, and change our identities from being a victim to a victor? Only God can. But we've got to acknowledge those weaknesses, and we got to be willing to share about the victories we've had over them. Another way we experience victories is when we learn to live one day at a time. I know, wouldn't it be nice if we all could just check out and be excused for the rest of our lives from working on ourselves? It'd be really nice. It is a choice, though. It is a choice. Live in denial from life or face it each day, and I hope you all will choose to stay the course and not give up. Our recoveries are more sustainable when we stay focused on living one day at a time. Plus, it's biblical. It's how God tells us to live in Matthew 6:34. It says, don't be anxious about tomorrow. God will take care of your tomorrow too. Live one day at a time. And when we live one day at a time, we gain more positive benefits. It can reduce our anxiety. That's a big one. A lot of people are struggling with that. When we practice dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, we fuel our anxiety. And this will happen when we focus on all the things we can't change from the past, or we focus on all the things we can't control in the future. But when we stay present, living in the moment, focused on today, making concerted effort to remember what positive changes we've made and what are we going to work on that day, that God will help us complete or do, then we can begin to focus less on our anxiety and more on our hope for our future. Also can help it to improve our focus. Because when we concentrate on the task at hand of living in the moment today, what we want to accomplish today, we're going to improve our ability to focus, which leads to more effectiveness in our life. It also helps to increase our gratitude, because when we notice the victories and the successes, we can appreciate both the big and small things we're having victory over. And this is going to foster more contentment and thankfulness within us. And the last one, living one day at a time, also helps us to learn how to be more flexible. Life is unpredictable, and things don't always go as planned. And we may have to shift in what we're doing. We may have to shift in how we're responding. And flexibility is the key in our recoveries, and why it's so important to practice living one day at a time, so we'll be in a place to have the capacity to shift if we need to. And I know it's really hard if we're not used to staying focused on living in the moment and living in the day. And it can be really hard, and especially when we have other extenuating factors in our lives that feel out of control around us. But this is where the rubber meets the road in our recovery, and we get to choose to live in the moment, focusing on what we can do, or get caught up in the chaos and all its dysfunctions. The next letter that will help us to continue to have victory is realize there are battles still to come. Isn't that good news? Aren't you glad you came tonight? Aren't we all happy to hear that? There are days where I feel like Kermit here, where I'm running around oblivious, just letting my scooter take me wherever it wants to go, typically making stops for my next poor reaction or dumb thing I might say or do. And when we don't stay present, it is easy to lose our awareness of what's going on around us. And then we get blindsided, we crash and burn, fall down. Either way, no matter what, more battles are coming. But life isn't over till it's over. And we get to choose how to face our battles, either in the moment by doing something different, or obsessing with or acting out of them. So let's keep it real and remember Philippians 1:6. I am sure that God, who began a good work in you, will keep on, right on helping you grow in his grace until his task within you is finally finished on that day when Jesus Christ returns. You know, Alexis reminded me today, about 3 years ago when we hired our children's minister, she did the announcements up here. The salty girl, who we all love. She reminded me that back when she first started working here, she was asking me a lot of questions about the CR program, and she was asking me, when I mentioned 3 years ago, I've been in CR now for 13 years, but then it was 10 years, and she's like, why are you still in CR? Why don't you just do 12-step and then be done and get out of the program? Why are you still, doing this? And why did you take so many 12 steps? And I told her I'm super messed up and I need lots of help. Okay, so that really wasn't my answer, but you might think it is, but it really wasn't my answer. But I did tell her that after my first 12-step, a layer gets peeled back. You work on something, that gets peeled back, and then all of a sudden you realize something else is underneath. There's a new issue God shows us that needs our attention. And I keep having them show up. I don't care how many 12 steps I do, some new layer shows up with something else underneath it that I need to pay attention to and work on it. And so, I don't know. I think as long as I'm still alive and walking planet Earth, my perfection doesn't arrive until I leave this place. So at this moment, I continue to walk through the battles that show up. All right, last but not least, another victory we have is when we discover you are not alone. That one's huge. It's huge. Before coming to CR, many of us, when we were in the midst of a storm, we felt alone. We start to believe that we're the only one with the problem, and we can't talk about it because, Lord forbid, what would everybody else think if they knew? But this kind of thinking gets us trapped in our unhealthy compulsions and addictions. And when we come here to CR, we discover we're not alone. There are just as many other messed up people as we are. And they're all here working on themselves and what they're going through as well. And knowing we're not alone and that there's other people going through the same thing, maybe a different issue, but working on themselves, it's going to help us all to experience more benefits. One, it helps to normalize this experience. The normalization that we're not alone can reduce our feelings of isolation and shame associated with our issues. It also helps to validate our experience, fostering a sense of support and compassion from other people. We can learn from others people's experiences, mistakes, successes, which all help to motivate us and make different choices. Others' journeys can also help to inspire us to persevere through our own difficulties. And the last one is it helps us to get plugged into a supportive community. These connections can provide a sense of belonging while we work on ourselves and what we're going through. So those are the benefits of discovering there are other people like us. But I want to remind us of the most important thing we need to remember is Hebrews 13:5, where God tells us, I will never leave you or forsake you. No matter what people are around us, sometimes people come and go through the program. No matter who's here or not here, God is always with us. He is going through this journey with us. He is walking through what we're going through. We are not alone. But we still cannot dismiss the value of engaging in community with others so we can find the support while we work through what we're going through. But sometimes in our group setting, our humanness can get in the way, and we take the focus off our own journey and start to focus on somebody else's journey. And this is seen when we try to offer advice or fix each other. It's called codependency when we try to do this, and it can be a really hard habit to break. You know, when I started coming to CR 13 years ago and learned about this fixing guideline, I struggled. I struggled with it a lot because there's been so many times after sitting through a share group meeting, I really wanted to fix somebody by giving them advice. And after a very painful experience, I think 1 year into coming to the program, one time I decided to do that, and it was a very painful experience that I will just tell you, I will never do it again. But it didn't get rid of the temptation that sometimes I was still so tempted after the meeting. I wanted to go tell somebody or I wanted to fix somebody. So I came up with my alternative route plan, which was as soon as the meeting was over, run and head home, get the heck out of here, because the only way I could keep myself from talking. Now, obviously that was years ago. I've made a lot more progress since then. Now I can bite my tongue and pretty much not say anything. I don't have to run out of here like I used to. But sometimes there's codependence. There's codependence in here. I know I'm not the only one. We need your help. Sometimes we're going to be able to stop ourselves. Sometimes we're not. We just need you to help us. We need you to kindly remind us when we're attempting to fix you. Just please be nice and tell us that you appreciate us and you thank us for our care and concern, but you're okay and you got it. And you know what? You're going to help us, codependents, when you do that. And so it's good to have community come together, but it's imperfect. We are dealing with each other. We're bringing our humanness into our share groups and in here together. So sometimes we leak them out on each other. So we got to help each other when that happens. So on the flip side, I talked about one side of dealing with the fixing guideline. On the flip side of the no fixing guideline, that you hear about when you go to share groups or do a 12-step, I know there's some that have told me they felt it feels very cold and insensitive to others when they're sharing something painful or deep. Everybody gets up and leaves and says nothing to that person. And I just want to remind everybody, don't take it personal. They did the right thing. That's exactly what they're supposed to do. That's exactly what the guidelines are for. And they're respecting the guidelines. That's how they're keeping the group safe. That's how we're making it comfortable for everybody to come and feel open to be able to share. But if you need input or validation, then ask somebody after the group meeting about what you shared afterwards, if you need that kind of input. Or if somebody in your group's experiencing victory over something you're struggling with, talk to them after the group. Ask them how they got there. What were the steps they took? What was the process like for them? You can ask questions afterwards. But I just want to, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here going over some of these guidelines, but this one's so important because of us coming together in a community. It can sometimes trigger us, upset us, and for different reasons. So I'm just trying to remind us all that we're human and we're going to do things. And we just got to talk about it. Let's just talk about it. So the guidelines in this program, like I mentioned, I've discovered it will give us freedom to focus on our journeys. It keeps the program safe for all of us here. And discovering for me that it was okay to let other people figure out their issues with God's help was a much better solution than me trying to tell them what I thought they should do anyway. And that also gives me the freedom to focus on working on myself and just to share my victories that I'm making on my journey when I have them. So that's all I got for you tonight, peeps. We're going to wrap